In this lesson, we will learn to set up a render using an override material. Now, the override function is a very good way of setting up your lighting and especially your camera angles. It allows you to set up a single material that will then be applied to your entire model without you actually going and changing the texture to those elements. What that means is that you could have a scene full of textured models, very complicated reflections, refractions, and all the rest, and you could apply that override material that will simply allow you to see the entire model in a gray or white or any color you choose and set up your lighting in a far more quicker workflow and quicker method. So let's go and set that up. We're going to start by hitting F10 on our keyboards, which is going to bring up the render setup. And under the V-Ray tab, go to your global switches and then just tick the override material box. Then you can open up your material editor by pressing M on your keyboard and create a standard material, or rather a V-Ray standard material. And let's call this one override. Then choose a diffuse color, which is going to, on average, be equal to the average color of your textures that you're going to use. So if your model is going to be very lightly shaded, use a quite light color. If you're going to be using very dark materials, then obviously use a darker color. Next, we're going to take this material and slide it into the override material slot, create an instance of it, and that is pretty much it for now. Now I'm going to pause the video and just render the scene exactly the way it is without making any further changes, and then we'll have a look at that render and see what else we can change. So here is a rendered version of the model that we set up in the last lesson. So nothing else has been done to the lighting or the camera settings since the last lesson, and we can now have a look at this and we can start studying what can be done to improve it. In other words, you can start choosing the time of day, you can set up your reflections in the material editor, so in other words your HDRI reflections can be set up, and that will start affecting your scene. If you do, however, want to go into a little bit more detail, there are a couple of other things that you can do. For example, the override material allows you to choose a edges texture, which is a very nice way of showing the edges to your model. Just before I go and add anything like glass or any other materials, I like to always choose the option of having a V-Ray edges texture and seeing the results that that gives me. I choose a world unit amount which is quite thin, generally 0.5 or 0.1. You can have a look. And then this will give you a nice gray outline around every single object. So let's pause the video again and see what results that gives us. So here we have our model rendered with that V-Ray edges texture, and you can see that you can read a lot more of the definition. Now, generally this is the scene that I set up when I choose all of my camera angles and when I set up the angle and intensity of the lights. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit more lighting intensity first of all, and I'm going to set up 1 or 2 camera angles at this point. So let's start by choosing our sun, and I'm going to increase the intensity to be 0.3. Then I'm going to go back to that camera angle, and I'm just going to try and tweak that angle slightly so that I get a better looking angle. So I'm going to choose something like this. And then remember, if you do have the opportunity, try to go and use the align vertical. I brought up this select from scene dialog box by pressing H on my keyboard, so just so that you can follow. And this will allow you to select the objects within your scene. So I'm going to go and choose the V-Ray physical cam. And while that V-Ray physical cam is selected, I like to also create selection sets of the single objects. Now, generally your selection sets will be used when you have a whole lot of objects within your scene that you would like to select in one go. But generally, because I can't see my cameras and my lighting, I like to just create a sun selection set as well as a camera selection set. So this is a quicker way of selecting your sun if it's not in your scene, so you can just select it by doing that. It's a nice little tip if you find it useful. So here, when you have your camera, just click guess vertical, and this will align your scene per camera so that it has vertical lines. It'll just make the scene look a lot better. So now let's go and pause the video and have a look at the result again. So that's the result of the render. I can see now that there is more lighting, and I am quite happy with the intensity. I don't want to go too sharp, otherwise it's going to blow out certain areas that are facing the sun. I do, however, think that I could increase the angle. In other words, the sun would look a little bit better if it was more to the right, so I'm going to make that change. Also, I can see that there is a bit of an issue with the mesh here, that it needs to be moved up slightly so that it's not showing this black area, which is basically me looking right through the mesh and seeing the background. Also, one of the reasons why it's nice to have a black background in the beginning, so you can see where those little errors are. So I'm going to go and fix that up by pausing the video, doing those changes, and then coming back to a slightly different camera angle, or slightly different lighting angle rather, with this little issue fixed as well. So here we go. Now the render is complete. The sun has been moved a little bit more to my right, which means that more of these walls are now in shade, and it's giving me more contrast on the facade. So I'm quite happy with how that's looking, and also this little issue has been fixed. So what I can do now is set up a few more camera angles, and this I'm going to do before the next lesson. So just to quickly show you how all of that is done. Also, a good thing to show you is the difference between the lighting and the camera angle. So my camera is at an angle of about 45 degrees, and the sun is just above vertical, or in other words, just above horizontal. In other words, if I put the camera like so, it would be shining light parallel to these walls, and if I move it just above, then it's going to be in shade, and that's exactly what I want. I want the light to be skimming these walls, and that's going to give me quite a lot of contrast on this entire facade. So next, what I want to do is to select my camera and to just holding down Shift to move it into another location, choose copy, and it's also a good idea to just rename your cameras and make it a little bit simpler to see. So generally Cam 001 and Cam 002 is a better naming method. Then you press C to see that camera angle, and then you can start rotating your model to get that new angle. In this case, we're going to do something from a little bit lower down, where we can see more of those bedrooms, and perhaps an angle where we can also see just the top of that pool. So generally skimming just above a level is a good idea. We can then choose to estimate the verticals so that they all align. And once that's done, we can do another render. So just before the end of this lesson, let's just quickly see what that looks like. So here's our view. It's been rendered. The render only took about a couple of seconds, so you can really see the benefit of using this override material, that you really are not wasting any precious time by having your computer calculate any complexity. So go ahead and choose as many camera angles as you need in this mode, and what we're going to look at in the next lesson is the next level of texturing, where we start to include glass and perhaps the water, and we can leave everything else white. And this will then allow us to start working on the reflections in our scene and trying to model, or at least achieve, a good environment that is giving us decent reflections. So all of that is in the next lesson.